Chapter 1. The Cold Before Dawn. The cold seeps through the floorboards before dawn, a familiar chill that has nothing to do with the weather. It's the cold of being unseen. Lily rises in this pre-dawn gray, her movements a silent apology for existing. The pack house sleeps, but her chores don't. Mending torn training clothes, scrubbing yesterday's feast from the great hall tables, stoking the fires that will warm everyone but her. This is her place, the ghost at the edge of the pack, the daughter of a man who looked away after my mother died, leaving her with nothing but a faded scent and the silvery scars that mar her skin, scars that brand her as weak, unworthy. They say a wolf's first memory is of their mother's heartbeat. Mine is of my father's silence. That silence is a constant companion, a heavy blanket she wraps herself in, because it's the only thing that feels like home. Today, however, it's broken by whispers from the kitchens. Anya and Kaylin, two of the pack's chosen daughters, are laughing. Their voices are like glass shards in the quiet. "Did you see her in training yesterday?" Anya's voice drips with a venomous honey. Flinched when the beta even looked at her. Pathetic. "She'll be lucky to be a servant for life," Kaylin adds, the sharp clink of her spoon stirring honey into tea, a counterpoint to her bitter words. "She'll never find a mate. Who would claim something so broken?" Lily freezes behind a stack of firewood, the rough bark digging into her palms. Each word is a stone, rebuilding the wall around her heart that she's spent a lifetime constructing. Broken. The word echoes in the hollow spaces inside her. It's a lie, she tells herself. A cruel story they repeat to feel stronger. She doesn't want a mate. She doesn't need to be claimed. She just wants to survive unnoticed, to get through another day without their pity or their scorn, because their pity is somehow worse than their hatred. She breathes in, a slow, ragged thing. Finishing her chores, her movements become mechanical, a puppet on invisible strings. Let them whisper. Let them laugh. She has her books. She has the river. That's more than enough. From that thought follows another, a darker one she rarely allows to surface. What if it isn't enough? What if one day, the loneliness finally gnaws through the wall and devours her whole? But as she slips back into the shadows, another, more urgent whisper catches her ear, a different tone entirely. "He's coming today." "Who?" "Alpha Zion, from the Blackwood Ridge. They say he's looking for something, or someone." A shiver, entirely new and unwelcome, traces its way down her spine. A powerful alpha. Here, in their territory. It means nothing for her, of course. A king doesn't notice a mouse in the castle walls, and she has perfected the art of being a mouse. And yet, the air suddenly feels different, heavier, charged with a storm she doesn't understand, a pressure building on the horizon of her small gray world. Chapter 2. The Wolf in the Woods. Escaping the suffocating air of the pack house, Lily finds her sanctuary. The riverbank is a world away, a secret place where the whispers can't reach her. Here, the only sounds are the gentle murmur of the water and the rustle of leaves in the ancient willow that guards her spot. She settles against its trunk, the rough bark a comforting presence at her back, and opens her book. The scent of old paper and ink is a balm to her frayed nerves. This is her real life, these moments of stolen peace, these journeys into other worlds. Here, she isn't the scarred outcast. She is a heroine, a scholar, a queen. She is anything but herself. The forest is alive around her. A symphony of birdsong, the distant snap of a twig, the sudden, unnerving silence. That's the first sign. The birds stop singing. The wind holds its breath. An immense pressure descends, the air growing thick and heavy, charged with an energy that makes the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. It's the feeling of a predator nearby. A very, very large predator. Her heart begins a frantic, hammering beat against her ribs. She slowly lifts her head, her senses screaming. He steps from the trees as if conjured from the shadows themselves. He is not just a man. He is a force of nature, an existence carved from the mountain itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura of raw, untamed power that radiates from him in visible waves, he moves with a liquid grace that is utterly at odds with his size. His eyes find hers across the clearing, and the world simply stops. They are gold. Not hazel, not amber, but the color of molten, liquid gold, burning with a predatory intensity that seems to strip her bare, to see every scar, every fear, every secret she holds. Fear is a cold, sharp thing in her throat. Her instincts scream at her to run, to cower, to make herself small and disappear. But she doesn't. After a lifetime of bowing, of flinching, something else rises up inside her, a spark of pure, unadulterated defiance. She holds his gaze. She clutches her book to her chest like a shield, her knuckles white. He takes a step closer. The forest floor seems to tremble. A low sound rumbles in his chest, a growl that is not just a sound but a feeling, a vibration that resonates deep in her bones, a primal declaration of dominance. Mine. The word doesn't echo in her ears, but in her very soul. The silence stretches, a battlefield between them. She is the prey, cornered and terrified. He is the apex predator, overwhelming and absolute. Yet she does not look away. For the first time in her life, she is truly seen, and the terror of it is matched only by a strange, exhilarating thrill. Who is this man? This wolf? What does he want with her? The questions swirl in her mind, a chaotic storm. Then, from the direction of the pack house, a horn sounds. A long, clear note that shatters the tension. The call for a formal gathering. A call she cannot ignore. His golden eyes narrow, a flicker of something, annoyance, possessiveness, in their depths. The moment is broken, but the connection, the invisible thread that has been spun between them, remains. It pulls taut as she slowly, deliberately gets to her feet. She has to go back. She has to face him again, not in the wild anonymity of the woods, but in the cruel spotlight of the pack. Chapter 3 Enough. The Great Hall is a special kind of torture. 100 smiling faces, 1,000 overlapping conversations, and all Lily feels is the crushing weight of her own isolation. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meat, pine from the fires, and the cloying perfume of the pack's chosen daughters. She tries to make herself small, to find a corner where the shadows are deep enough to swallow her whole. Her alpha, a man she respects but who has never truly seen her, is making a speech. Her gaze, however, keeps drifting to the stranger standing at his side. The alpha from the woods. Zion. He is just as terrifying here as he was by the river, a storm contained in the flesh of a man, his eyes sweeping over the crowd with an unnerving intensity. She feels their path, a physical heat as they pass over her, and her breath catches. She quickly looks away, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. To be seen is to be judged, and I have been judged unworthy my entire life. Disappearing is the only defense I have left. She is trying to slip away, to melt back into the nothingness she calls home, when it happens. Marcus, a burly enforcer who has always seemed to enjoy her discomfort, sticks his foot out. It's a casual, cruel movement she doesn't see until it's too late. She goes down, hard. The stone floor rushes up to meet her, the impact jarring her teeth. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd, followed by a wave of snickering. The fall tears the sleeve of her worn, mended dress. The delicate fabric rips from shoulder to elbow, exposing the one thing she always keeps hidden. The network of silvery scars on her shoulder and arm, scars that tell a story of weakness, of a childhood fever her wolf barely survived, scars that set her apart. The laughter grows louder, pointing fingers. Whispers of damaged, unclean, broken, slither through the air like snakes. This is it. Her nightmare, made real. To be on display, her deepest shame laid bare for everyone to see. Her throat closes. She can't breathe. The room starts to spin, the faces blurring into a gallery of leering masks. She wants the ground to open up and devour her whole. Her eyes burn, but she will not give them the satisfaction of her tears. She is frozen, trapped in a spotlight of pure, unadulterated humiliation. Then, the world goes silent. Not quiet. Silent. A deep, predatory silence that suffocates all other sound. The laughter dies in throats. The pointing fingers drop. A pressure descends on the room. A wave of pure, undiluted power that makes her bones ache and the air crackle. It's coming from him. Alpha Zion. She dares to look up. His face is carved from granite, his eyes no longer assessing but burning with a cold, black rage that seems to suck all the warmth from the air. His gaze is locked on the cowering Marcus, but she feels the heat of his fury wrapping around her like a shield. His voice cuts through the silence. It's low and lethal, not a shout, but it carries more weight than any scream, a command that brooked no argument. Enough. Chapter 4, Mine. The word hangs in the air. Enough. It's a physical thing. A stone dropped into the dead silent pool of the Great Hall, the ripples spreading outwards as waves of pure, undiluted power. Lily is still on the floor, the cold of the stone seeping into her skin, a strange counterpoint to the hot flush of shame burning on her cheeks. Every eye in the room is fixed. Not on her, but on the visiting Alpha. Zion. He moves. He doesn't walk so much as flow from his place beside her Alpha, a predator descending from its throne. The crowd parts before him, a sea of bodies receding from an unstoppable tide. Marcus, the one who tripped her, has gone pale, the color draining from his face as if Zion's fury is siphoning it away. Lily's heart hammers against her ribs, a wild, trapped thing. He's coming. For her. He stops directly in front of her, his large frame blocking out the rest of the world, casting her in his shadow. For a terrifying moment, she is trapped in his orbit, the only two people in a universe of silence. He crouches down. Not with pity, but with a deliberate, focused intensity. His golden eyes are no longer burning with rage, but with something else. Something she can't name. It's ancient and possessive, and it makes her tremble. He extends a hand. It's large and calloused, a warrior's hand. She hesitates, her mind screaming. Don't touch him. Don't accept. But her body betrays her. Slowly, as if in a dream, she places her trembling fingers in his palm. A jolt, like lightning, arcs up her arm. It's not just warmth. It's life. It's power. It's a connection so profound it steals the air from her lungs. He effortlessly pulls her to her feet, his grip firm and unshakable. He doesn't let go. Instead, he turns to face the stunned, silent pack, his voice ringing with absolute authority, a king making a decree. She is with me. A gasp ripples through the crowd. Her own Alpha takes a half step forward, his face a mask of disbelief. Zion's gaze sweeps the room, a challenge to any who would dare question him. Then he looks down at her, his voice dropping, a low rumble meant only for her, but a sound that seems to echo in every corner of the hall. She is mine. The words shatter the last of Lily's composure. This isn't rescue. This is a claiming. A public declaration that turns her from an object of scorn into an object of possession. It's a different cage, but a cage nonetheless. The shock gives way to a hot, wild fury. Who is he? Who does he think he is? This is pity. The grandest, most humiliating form of pity she has ever endured. She tries to wrench her hand from his grasp, her small frame straining against his immovable strength. No, she whispers, the word a ragged, desperate sound. No. He simply tightens his grip, his golden eyes holding hers, a silent promise that this is only the beginning. The battle of wills is silent, but it rages between them, a fire in the center of the frozen hall. Chapter 5. Recognition. The heavy oak door of the antechamber clicks shut, the sound unnervingly final. They are alone. The suffocating silence of the great hall is replaced by a new, more intimate tension, a crackling energy that fills the small space, making the air thick and hard to breathe. For a moment, Lily just stands there, her arm still tingling where he held it. Then the dam of her shock and fury breaks. She spins on him, her eyes blazing with a fire he has not seen before. "Who gave you the right?" she demands, her voice low and shaking with emotion. Zion watches her, his expression unreadable. He is leaning against the far wall, his arms crossed over his massive chest, looking entirely too calm. It infuriates her. "You are being torn apart," he states simply, his voice a deep, quiet rumble. "And you thought you would save me? You thought I needed some great, powerful alpha to swoop in and rescue the poor, broken girl?" The word broken comes out as a snarl. "That wasn't a rescue, that was a spectacle. You've made it worse. Now they don't just think I'm weak. Now they think I'm your charity case." He says nothing, just watches her pace the small room like a caged wolf, her movements filled with a desperate, frantic energy. This is what she does. She pushes people away before they can reject her. It's the only defense she's ever known, because the only thing worse than being unwanted is the brief, false hope that you might be. "I don't want your pity," she finally says, stopping in front of him, her chin lifted in defiance. He uncrosses his arms. He moves. In 2 long, silent strides, he closes the distance between them. Lily's breath catches in her throat. She takes a step back, her defiance faltering, and finds her back pressed against the cold, unyielding stone of the wall. He doesn't touch her, but he is so close she can feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the scent of pine and wild, clean air that clings to him. He places one hand on the wall beside her head, trapping her. "Look at me," he commands, his voice soft but laced with steel. She forces herself to meet his gaze. The gold in his eyes is mesmerizing, pulling her in. "Do you truly believe," he says slowly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "that this is pity?" She can't answer. Her heart is a frantic drum against her ribs. He leans in closer, his face just inches from hers. She can see the flecks of darker gold in his irises, the hard line of his jaw. "When I saw you by the river, I felt it. When I saw them humiliate you, I knew it. This isn't pity, Lily." He says her name for the first time, and it sounds like a forgotten melody, a prayer. It's recognition. The word hangs in the air between them, heavy with a meaning she can't grasp. Recognition? Of what? Before she can form the question, his gaze drops to her lips. The energy between them ignites, a roaring inferno. He lowers his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. She doesn't. She can't. Her world narrows to this single, terrifying, exhilarating moment. His lips are about to touch hers when a sharp, authoritative knock echoes from the door, shattering the spell. Chapter 6. The Burning Mark. The knock on the door is a physical blow, snapping the taut wire of tension between them. Zion pulls back, a muscle working in his jaw, a flicker of raw frustration in his golden eyes. Lily sucks in a ragged breath, her back still pressed against the cold stone, her lips tingling with the ghost of a kiss that never happened. The door opens without waiting for a reply. Elder Thomas, the most senior member of her pack's council, stands there, his face a mask of grim disapproval, his eyes completely ignoring Zion to fix on her. "Alpha Zion," Thomas says, his voice tight with barely concealed outrage. "A word, if you please. About this matter." He gestures vaguely in Lily's direction as if she is a piece of furniture, an inconvenient object. The shame, which had been momentarily forgotten, comes rushing back, cold and sharp. She is a matter. A problem to be dealt with. She expects Zion to dismiss her, to handle this political mess he has created. Instead, he turns, his body a solid wall between her and the elders' condemning gaze. "The matter is settled," Zion says, his voice deceptively calm. "She is unsuitable," Thomas presses on, emboldened by a foolish sense of duty. "She is weak-blooded, scarred, an Omega by nature, if not by rank. She has never completed a full transformation without collapsing. To claim her is an insult to our pack and a sign of weakness in yours." Every word is a hammer blow, striking the foundations of the tiny, fragile hope that had begun to sprout in her heart. He's right. She is all those things. She is unworthy. She looks at Zion's broad back, waiting for him to see the truth, to realize his mistake and cast her aside. This is it. The rejection she always knew was coming. Zion doesn't speak. He doesn't turn. Instead, the room grows cold. The air thickens, pressure building until it's hard to breathe. It's the same wave of absolute power from the Great Hall, but 100 times more potent in this small space. Elder Thomas chokes, his eyes widening in terror as the invisible force presses down on him. He stumbles back, his knees buckling, forced to bow his head in submission. "Her standing is now my standing," Zion says, his voice a low, lethal growl that vibrates through the very stones of the castle. "Her strength is my strength. Any insult to her is a declaration of war against me and all of Blackwood Ridge. Do you understand me, Elder?" "Yes. Alpha," Thomas chokes out, his face pale with fear and awe. Zion holds the pressure for another heartbeat before releasing it. The air rushes back into the room. Thomas scrambles away, his dignity in tatters. The message has been sent. The protest is crushed. Lily stares, her mind reeling. She wasn't just claimed. She has been bound to this terrifying, powerful man. There is no going back. Her old life, the quiet, painful world she knew, is gone forever. "Come," Zion says, turning back to her. He holds out his hand. It is not a request. Numbly, she takes it. His fingers wrap around her forearm, his grip possessive and certain. As his skin touches hers, a sharp, searing heat ignites beneath his grasp. It's not a simple burn. It's a pain that feels like it's coming from her very soul, a white-hot brand sinking into her flesh. A small, involuntary cry escapes her lips. It feels like he has marked her, a permanent, undeniable claim that burns deeper than skin, a seal being set on her fate. Chapter 7. The Gilded Cage. The journey to Blackwood Ridge was a blur of towering pines and suffocating silence. Lily sat beside Zion in the strange, roaring metal machine he called a truck, the world she knew shrinking in the rearview mirror until it was nothing more than a painful memory. The mark on her arm had cooled from a searing brand to a constant, insistent thrum, a low hum of energy that felt like it was sinking her pulse to his. It was a terrifying, intimate feeling, a permanent chain linking the broken Omega to the formidable Alpha. She was his. The thought didn't bring comfort. It brought a cold, sharp dread that settled deep in her bones. What did it even mean to belong to someone like him? As they cleared the final mountain pass, she saw it. Blackwood Keep. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress. It rose from the mountainside like a jagged black tooth, a brutal thing of dark stone and sharp angles, windows like suspicious eyes staring down at the valley below. No warmth, no welcome, just a raw, uncompromising declaration of power. This was his home? This cage? The massive gates groaned open, and the machine rolled into a courtyard teeming with warriors. They were different from her pack, bigger, harder. They moved with a disciplined, militaristic precision, their eyes sharp and assessing as they watched her climb out of the machine. The air itself felt different here, charged, tense, like the moments before a lightning strike. Whispers followed her, a new chorus of condemnation, but this time they weren't mocking. They were suspicious. Hostile. A woman detached herself from the crowd. She was tall and lean, with a river of silver blonde hair braided down her back and eyes the color of a winter sky. Her presence was second only to Zion's in its intensity. "Alpha," she said, her voice crisp and cool as she dipped her head to Zion, her gaze flicking to Lily with open disdain. "The council is waiting." "They can continue to wait, Lyra," Zion replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. "See to our guest." Lyra's smile was a thin, sharp thing, like the edge of a blade. Of course. She led Lily into the keep, her silence more damning than any insult. The inside was as cold and imposing as the outside, all dark wood, polished stone, and imposing tapestries depicting brutal, bloody battles. It was a monument to strength, a place where weakness would be swallowed whole. They finally stopped before a set of huge carved doors. "Your quarters," Lyra said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "The Alpha thought you would be comfortable here." She pushed the doors open. Lily's breath caught. The room was immense. A cavernous space with a huge hearth, a bed that could sleep 10, and silks and furs draped over every surface. It was more luxurious than anything she had ever seen, and it was the coldest, loneliest place she had ever been. A gilded cage. "We are a pack of warriors, Lily," Lyra said softly, her voice a serpent's hiss by Lily's ear. "We value strength, loyalty. We do not suffer liabilities. Remember that." The doors clicked shut, leaving Lily alone in the deafening silence. She was an outsider, a liability, a weakness. The words echoed in the vast emptiness of the room. She walked to a large, ornate mirror and stared at her reflection. A small, pale girl in a torn dress, looking lost and out of place. Her eyes fell to her forearm. The burning was gone. In its place, a faint, silvery pattern was beginning to form on her skin, a swirling, intricate design like a constellation she had never seen before. What was this mark? What had he done to her? Chapter 8. A Spark in the Dark. The next morning, Zion found her. She was standing by the large window, watching the warriors train in the courtyard below, a brutal, synchronized dance of violence. He didn't make a sound, but she felt his presence, a shift in the air that announced him more clearly than any footstep. "You will join them today," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. Lily turned, her heart starting its familiar, frantic beat. I'm not a fighter." "No, you are a survivor," he corrected, his golden eyes intense. "There is a difference. They see a weakness he brought into their home. You will not train to learn how to fight. You will train to show them you are not easily broken." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "You will train to prove you belong here." The training grounds were a circle of hard-packed earth and palpable hostility. The air smelled of sweat, steel, and something else. A primal, coppery scent that spoke of blood. The warriors stopped as she entered, their eyes like a pack of wolves sizing up a new, strange animal. Lyra stood in the center, her arms crossed, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Look what the Alpha dragged in." A large, muscular beta named Jorik sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. A ripple of harsh laughter followed. "Jorik," Lyra called out, her voice sharp, "you will be our guest's first partner. Show her how we welcome new additions to the pack." Jorik's grin was predatory. He was twice her size, a mountain of muscle and arrogance. This wasn't a spar. It was an execution. He stalked towards her, cracking his knuckles. "Don't worry, little Omega," he purred. "I'll be gentle." He lunged. Lily flinched back, her body reacting on pure instinctual fear. He was toying with her, his movements lazy and mocking. He feinted left, then right, laughing as she stumbled to avoid him. The crowd of warriors laughed with him. The old, familiar shame washed over her, hot and suffocating. She was pathetic, weak, exactly what they all thought she was. No, the word was a silent scream in her mind, A tiny spark of the defiance she'd felt by the river flickered to life. He lunged again, this time for real, his hand reaching to grab her. But as he moved, her mind, a mind filled not with battle tactics but with words and knowledge from 1,000 books, saw something else. Not a warrior, but a machine of muscle and bone, a machine with levers and fulcrums. A passage from a book on anatomy flashed in her memory, a diagram of the human body's weak points. Instead of retreating, she did the one thing he didn't expect. She moved towards him. As his arm shot out, she ducked under it, pivoting on her heel. She hooked her foot behind his ankle, a clumsy, desperate move, and pushed with all her might against the back of his knee. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. He was an immovable mountain, but she had his momentum. He was moving forward, and she had just taken away one of his foundations. He went down. He didn't just fall. He crashed. The mountain of a man hit the hard-packed earth with a ground-shaking thud that knocked the wind from his lungs. A collective gasp of disbelief rippled through the warriors. Silence. Utter, stunned silence. Jorik lay on the ground, his face a mask of pure shock. Lily stood over him, her chest heaving, her body trembling with adrenaline. She hadn't won. She had just survived. He scrambled to his feet, his face twisting into a mask of pure, humiliated fury. "You little... That is enough." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a razor, freezing Jorik in place. Zion. He stood at the edge of the training circle, his arms crossed. He had been there the whole time, watching. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone. But his eyes, his golden eyes were fixed on her. And for the first time she saw something other than possession in their depths. It was something that looked almost like respect. Chapter 9. The Red Fang. A tense, unspoken truce settled over the pack in the days that followed. The whispers didn't stop, but they changed. The open mockery was replaced by a grudging, resentful curiosity. Lily continued her training, enduring the hostility, but something inside her had shifted. The small, desperate victory against Yorick had lit a tiny flame in the cold, empty rooms of her heart. She wasn't strong, not like them, but she wasn't completely helpless either. She carried herself differently, her shoulders a little straighter, her gaze no longer permanently fixed on the floor. Her interactions with Zion were complicated. He was a constant, looming presence, his golden eyes seeming to follow her everywhere. Yet he rarely spoke to her. The silence between them was a living thing, filled with the unspoken words of the kiss that had almost happened, the crackling energy of the mate bond, and 1,000 questions she was too afraid to ask. It was a strange dance of avoidance and magnetic attraction, a push and pull that left her nerves frayed and her body humming with a constant, low-grade awareness of him. Was this what a bond felt like? This constant, unnerving pull towards a man who was both her protector and her captor? The fragile peace shattered on the 3rd day. An urgent summons brought her to the great hall. It was not the bustling, fire-lit room of a feast, but a cold, grim chamber. Zion stood before the Alpha's throne, flanked by Lyra and his senior council. Their faces were carved from granite. A man knelt on the floor before them, his body slumped with exhaustion, his clothes torn and stained with dried blood. A messenger. "He is from the borderlands," Zion said, his voice a low rumble that echoed in the stone hall. He didn't look at Lily, but she knew his words were for her. "He carries a message." One of the council members, an old scarred wolf with one eye, unrolled a scroll. The parchment was sealed with a blood-red wax, stamped with the image of a snarling wolf's head. "It is from Alpha Kyle," the old wolf growled, "of the Red Fang Pack." Zion finally looked at her, his golden eyes pinning her in place. "Read it." The old wolf's voice filled the hall, each word a stone dropping into a deep, dark well. The message was brutal and direct. It spoke of ancient pacts between their packs, pacts that Zion had broken by claiming an unworthy mate. It called Lily a scarred Omega outcast, a blight on the bloodlines, a weakness that would rot Zion's pack from the inside out. Then came the demand. Alpha Kale demands that the Omega Girl be surrendered to his pack for judgment according to the old laws. The wolf read, his voice grim. Refusal will be seen as a declaration of war. The room exploded. Angry snarls and shouts of outrage erupted from the council. Lyra's face was a mask of cold fury. This was it, the confirmation of all their fears. She was a liability, a catalyst for war, a curse upon this pack. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. This was her fault, all of it. The lives of all these warriors would be on her hands. She looked at Zion, her heart sinking, expecting to see anger, regret, the cold calculation of an alpha weighing the cost of a bad decision. But he wasn't looking at his counsel. He wasn't looking at the messenger. He was looking only at her. And the expression on his face was not that of a leader considering a political crisis. It was the raw, terrifying, possessive look of a predator whose most prized possession has just been threatened. His voice cut through the chaos, a low, dangerous promise that silenced the entire room. They will not have what is mine, what is. Chapter 10. The Anchor in the Storm. The keep was a drum, the constant humming tension of impending war beating against its stone walls. Warriors moved with a new, deadly purpose. The clang of the forge rang day and night. Every shadow seemed to hold a whispered debate. Every eye that fell on Lily was filled with a mix of fear and accusation. She was the spark. She was the reason their sons and brothers and mates would soon bleed. The weight of it was a physical thing, a cloak of guilt so heavy it made it hard to breathe. She found herself in the one place that seemed quiet, a high stone balcony overlooking the moonlit forest, the cold night air a welcome shock to her senses. They are afraid. Zion's voice came from the shadows behind her. He moved with an impossible silence, his presence a sudden warmth at her back. They should be, Lily whispered, not turning to face him. It's my fault. That message... Kale is right. I am a weakness. No. The word was a low, rumbling growl, filled with an unshakable certainty that defied all logic. He stepped up beside her, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. The sheer size of him was overwhelming, yet she didn't feel threatened. You are the reason we will have the strength to fight. They threaten you because they fear what you mean to me. What do I mean to you? The question slipped out, a raw, vulnerable thing. Was she a political pawn? A prize he'd claimed out of pride? A mistake he was now forced to defend? He finally turned to face her, his large hands coming up to cup her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheeks. His golden eyes burned with an emotion so raw, so intense it made her gasp. It wasn't the look of an alpha assessing his strategy. It was the look of a man staring at the very center of his world. You, he said, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name, are the anchor in the storm. You are the stillness in the heart of the rage. And then the world fell away. The fear of war, the guilt, the whispers, it all vanished, consumed by the inferno in his eyes. The bond between them, the constant humming thing beneath her skin, roared to life. It wasn't just a pull anymore. It was a physical need, a desperate, aching hunger. He lowered his head, and this time there was no knock on the door to save her. This time, she didn't want to be saved. His kiss was not gentle. It was acclaiming, a desperate, hungry thing filled with all the unspoken tension that had raged between them from the very first moment. It was the crash of thunder after a long, suffocating silence. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, meeting his raw passion with her own. This was not about pity. It was not about rescue. This was two souls, lost in their own storms, finally finding a shore in each other. He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her inside, the heavy doors of her chamber swinging shut behind them, sealing them in their own world. The night was a blur of tangled limbs and whispered words, of desperate touches and soft sighs. He showed her that her scars were not marks of shame, but lines of beauty. He showed her that her body was not a broken, fragile thing, but a source of incredible pleasure. He showed her that she was not a weakness, but a fire that could match his own. For the first time in her life, Lily didn't feel broken. She felt whole. Later, in the quiet, tangled peace of the aftermath, she lay curled against his side, his steady heartbeat a soothing drum beneath her ear. The world, with all its threats, still waited outside. But in here, she was safe. He gently traced the silvery marks on her shoulder, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "It's strange," he murmured, his voice a low vibration against her hair. "Under the moonlight, they almost look like constellations, like writing from a language no one speaks anymore." Chapter 11. The Moonfire Sigil. The world felt different in the morning, softer. The light filtering through the window seemed less harsh, the cold stone of the keep less intimidating. Lying in the warmth of the firs, tangled with Zion, Lily felt a fragile, tentative peace she had never known. His words from the night before echoed in her mind, like writing from a language no one speaks anymore. She traced the marks on her shoulder herself, a familiar act that for the first time was not tinged with shame, but with a strange curiosity. Later, as she walked through the keep, a new, subtle confidence in her step, she almost didn't notice the old she-wolf watching her. Her name was Alara, the pack's lorekeeper, a creature of scrolls and memories, her eyes clouded with age and wisdom. Her gaze wasn't hostile like the others. It was intense, fixated. As Lily passed, her dress, a simple silk thing Zion had left for her, slipped slightly off her shoulder. Alara gasped. A sharp, audible intake of breath that made Lily freeze. The old wolf's cloudy eyes were wide with a look of utter shock and something else. Reverence. "Child," Alara rasped, her voice like dry leaves skittering across stone. She took a frail, trembling step forward. "The marks on your skin. May I see them?" Hesitantly, Lily nodded. Alara led her away from the main hall into a small, circular room that smelled of old parchment, dried herbs, and dust. Ancient scrolls were stacked to the ceiling. This was the heart of the pack's history. Alara gently pulled the silk of the dress aside, her gnarled fingers tracing the silvery patterns on Lily's shoulder with a touch as light as a moth's wing. "It cannot be," the old wolf whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "After all these years." She turned and shuffled to a heavy wooden chest, pulling out a scroll so old it looked like it would crumble to dust. With painstaking care, she unrolled it on a large table. It was a complex genealogical chart, a family tree of ancient bloodlines. Her trembling finger traced a line that ended abruptly, generations ago. Beside the final name was a symbol, a swirling, intricate design, like a silver constellation. It was the exact same pattern that was etched into Lily's skin. "Your scars," Alara said, her voice filled with awe, "are not scars. They are the sigil of the Moonfire bloodline." Lily stared, her mind struggling to make sense of the words. "Moonfire? I don't understand." "A legendary lineage from the Red Fang clan," Alara explained, her voice gaining strength. "They were said to be blessed by the moon itself. Their females were powerful, seers, healers, kingmakers. They were hunted down, wiped out by a rival alpha in their own pack who feared their power. We all thought the bloodline was lost to time, a story to tell pups." The implications crashed down on Lily with the force of a physical blow, her weakness, the fever that nearly killed her as a child. It wasn't a fever. It was her blood, her power, trying to awaken in a body that wasn't ready. Her father's rejection, her pack's scorn. It was all built on a lie. She wasn't a broken Omega. She was something else entirely. "The sigil lies dormant," Alara whispered, her eyes wide. "It only becomes visible under great stress, or when a true mate's touch awakens it." The door to the chamber opened. Zion stood there, his gaze taking in the scene. The ancient scroll, Ilara's tear-streaked face, the look of utter, world-shattering shock on Lily's. His eyes fell to the symbol on the parchment, then to the identical, shimmering mark on her shoulder. The pieces clicked into place, and a look of cold, chilling understanding dawned on his face. He finally understood Kale's obsession. "Goddess," Zion breathed, the words a harsh, raw sound. He doesn't want to punish an outcast. He wants to reclaim a queen. Chapter 12. Stolen Property. The air in the council chamber was thick with a new kind of tension. The previous anger and fear had been replaced by a stunned, strategic awe. The warriors and elders who had once looked at Lily with scorn now stared at her with a mixture of disbelief and reverence. She was no longer a liability. She was a living myth, a ghost from a history book, a weapon they never knew they had, and a prize their enemy was willing to go to war for. The weight of their stares was heavier than any mockery she had ever endured. "This changes everything," Lyra said, her voice stripped of its usual icy disdain, replaced by a grudging respect. "If Kale gets his hands on her, on that bloodline, he could solidify his rule for generations," the one-eyed elder finished, his voice a low growl. "The Red Fangs would follow a Moonfire Alpha into any battle. He would become unstoppable." As if summoned by the words, another messenger was brought in. This one was from Kale's pack, an arrogant wolf who knelt with a smirk, carrying not a threat, but a proposal. Zion took the scroll and read it aloud, his voice cold and flat. The tone was completely different from the first message. There were no more insults, no more talk of a scarred Omega. Instead, Kale spoke of righting ancient wrongs, of reclaiming what was stolen, of the sacred duty to protect the hallowed Moonfire bloodline. He was offering Zion a truce, a powerful alliance. All Zion had to do was return the lost princess to her rightful people. To him. The room was silent, every eye turning from Zion to Lily. She was a bargaining chip again, the most valuable bargaining chip in the history of their people. She could save them all. She could prevent a war simply by surrendering herself. The thought was a cold, familiar poison seeping into her veins. Her entire life she had been a burden. Now she could finally be useful. By sacrificing herself. No. The word was quiet, but it cut through the heavy silence of the chamber. It was her own voice. Lily took a step forward, her legs trembling but her resolve solidifying, every eye locked on her. It was the first time she had ever spoken in front of the council. "You don't understand," she said, her voice gaining strength as she looked from one hardened face to the next. "I've read about men like Kale in my books. He doesn't want an alliance. He wants to possess power, not partner with it. He won't honor her," she said, pointing to the sigil on her own shoulder. "He will cage her. He will use her. And when he is done, he will discard her. Giving me to him won't prevent a war. It will only guarantee his victory in the one that is to come." A murmur of surprise and consideration went through the council. They weren't just looking at a symbol anymore. They were listening to a woman with a mind as sharp as any warrior's blade. Zion had remained silent through it all, watching her. A slow, proud smile touched his lips. He stepped to her side, his presence a solid, unshakable wall. He took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers in front of his entire council. It was a gesture of unwavering solidarity, a silent declaration. "Send a message back to the Red Fang Alpha," Zion commanded, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "Tell him Blackwood Keep does not negotiate with thieves, and what is mine stays mine." The lines were drawn. War was now a certainty. Later that night, as a fragile peace settled over the keep, Lily stood with Zion on the same balcony where he had first kissed her. The world felt infinitely more dangerous, yet she felt stronger than she ever had. "Zion," she asked, her voice a near whisper, "who was my mother?" "Really?" How did a moonfire end up as an outcast in a small, remote pack? The question hung in the cold night air, an unanswered riddle, a new mystery rising from the ashes of the old one. Chapter 13. The Uncaged Choice. The keep held its breath. Every warrior, every servant, every soul within the dark stone walls seemed to be waiting for the first tremor of the coming earthquake. The declaration had been sent, the defiance made clear. Now, there was only the waiting. Lily found the silence more unnerving than the threat of battle. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of future screams, the specter of a war she had caused. Zion found her in his study, a vast room of maps and strategies, the air thick with the scent of old leather and his own formidable presence. He didn't speak at first, just watched her as she traced the lines of a river on a map, her finger trembling slightly. "There is a way," he said finally, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Lily looked up. His face was a mask of stone, but his golden eyes held a deep, painful conflict. "A secret path through the western mountains," he continued, his voice flat as if reciting a memorized plan. "It leads to the coast. I have allies there, a small neutral pack who owe me a great debt. They would keep you safe, hidden. No one would ever know. Kale's reason for war would be gone." The offer hung in the air between them, a lifeline, an escape hatch from the cage that was closing in around her. The old Lily, the girl who lived in the shadows, whose only goal was to be unnoticed, screamed at her to take it, to run, to disappear and let the world forget she ever existed. The fear was a cold, familiar serpent coiling in her gut. She could be safe. She could be free. But free from what? Free from the whispers and the hate, yes. But also free from the look in Zion's eyes when he called her his anchor. Free from the tiny, flickering flame of strength she had discovered within herself. Free from the only place she had ever, for a single breathtaking night, felt whole. "You would be giving up your greatest weapon," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The moonfire sigil." "You are not a weapon," he bit out, the words sharp and fierce. "You are my mate. Your safety is more important than any strategy." She looked at him then, truly looked at the powerful alpha who was willing to sacrifice a legendary advantage just to keep her from harm. And in his eyes, she saw the truth. This wasn't a test. He meant it, and that, more than anything else, gave her the strength she needed. "No." The word was quiet, but it filled the cavernous study with an undeniable finality. Zion's head snapped up, his eyes widening in surprise. "If I run," she said, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she possessed, "then I am everything Kale says I am, a prize to be hidden, a weakness to be protected. The girl who brought a war and then fled from it. My whole life has been about running, Zion, about disappearing. I cannot do it again." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I am staying, not as a sigil to be wielded or a princess to be sheltered, but as a member of this pack. I will face this with you." He stared at her, the stony mask of the alpha cracking, revealing the man beneath. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face, his touch a reverent, trembling thing. The look in his eyes was not of a leader who had just had his orders defied. It was a look of pure, unadulterated awe. "I knew," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "When I first saw you by the river, I knew the fire was in there." He didn't kiss her. It was something more profound. He simply rested his forehead against hers, a silent, binding oath passing between them. The choice had been made. Not by him, but by her. And in that choice, the fate of Blackwood Keep was sealed. Chapter 14, First Blood. The first blow fell not with the crash of a war horn, but in the deceptive quiet of a border patrol. The days following Lily's choice were a blur of frenetic preparation. The keep buzzed like a disturbed hive. While she could not wield a sword, Lily refused to be idle. She took over the infirmary, her mind a library of herbal remedies and healing techniques gleaned from her years of reading. She organized supplies, prepared poultices, and taught the other she-wolves what she knew. It was a small thing, but it was hers, a way to fight her own battle. Zion was a whirlwind of motion, a force of nature drilling his warriors, mapping strategies, his presence a constant, reassuring anchor in the rising tide of fear. One afternoon, he found her grinding herbs, her hands stained with green. "Come with me," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "You need to breathe air that doesn't taste of fear." He took her on horseback, not on a patrol, but to a high meadow just within the forest's edge, a place of wildflowers and quiet beauty. It was a stolen moment of peace, a desperate attempt to remember what they were fighting for. But peace was an illusion. The attack came with no warning. One moment they were watching an eagle soar on the wind. The next, the world exploded. Warriors erupted from the trees, their fur bristling, their snarls tearing the air. Red Fang soldiers, dozens of them. It was an ambush. Zion's transformation was instantaneous, a seamless, violent ripple of flesh and bone. The man was gone, replaced by a monstrous black wolf, a beast of nightmare and legend. He threw himself in front of her, his body a living shield, a deep, rumbling growl shaking the very ground. The fight was a maelstrom of claws and teeth, a chaotic, brutal dance of death. Lily was frozen, her mind unable to process the sheer speed and savagery. An attacker broke through the lines, a huge, scarred wolf with cunning, intelligent eyes. It wasn't focused on the other fighters. It was coming for her. Before she could scream, Zion was there. He met the wolf in a clash of bodies that sounded like thunder. But the attacker was clever. It feinted, twisting with impossible speed. Lily saw the flash of claws, long and sharp as daggers, arcing towards her. Zion threw himself in their path. The claws raked across his side, a spray of dark blood painting the wildflowers crimson. He roared, a sound of pure agony and fury, and his jaws snapped shut on the attacker's throat, ending the fight in a single vicious second. But he was hurt, badly. Seeing his blood, seeing the deep, ragged gashes in his side, something inside Lily snapped. The fear didn't vanish. It was consumed by something hotter, something primal. A white-hot, blinding rage. As another Red Fang warrior lunged for the wounded Zion, she didn't think. She acted. She grabbed a heavy, fallen branch, her hands clumsy, her movements fueled by pure, desperate adrenaline. She let out a scream, not of a victim, but of a predator, and swung the branch with all her might. It connected with the side of the warrior's head with a sickening crack. He stumbled, his eyes wide with shock, giving Zion the second he needed to recover. The remaining ambushers, their leader dead and their ranks broken, melted back into the forest. The meadow was suddenly, unnervingly silent, save for Zion's harsh, pained breathing. He shifted back, collapsing to one knee, his human form slick with blood, his hand pressed against his wounded side. Lily rushed to him, her rage vanishing as quickly as it came, replaced by a cold, sharp terror. As she knelt beside him, her eyes scanned the carnage, the bodies of the fallen. And then she saw it, just for a second. One of the dead Red Fang warriors. She saw his hand twitch in a final dying spasm. 2 fingers, tapping twice against his thigh. A quick, precise gesture. A gesture she had seen the Blackwood guards use to signal all clear just that morning. Chapter 15. The Serpent Signal. The infirmary smelled of blood, antiseptic herbs, and fear. The air was thick with the low groans of the wounded and the quiet, urgent movements of the healers. Lily worked with a cold, detached focus, cleaning wounds, applying poultices. Her mind 1,000 miles away, replaying that single, impossible moment in the meadow over and over again. 2 taps, a Blackwood signal. Zion lay on a cot, his breathing shallow, his face pale beneath his tanned skin. Alara, the old lore-keeper, was stitching the deep gashes in his side, her movements slow and steady. Every stitch felt like it was pulling Lily's own skin, a sharp, vicarious pain. He had been hurt for her. This was the price of her choice. Guilt was a bitter acid in her throat, but beneath it, something else was crystallizing. a cold, hard suspicion that chilled her to the bone. An ambush that precise. They knew exactly where Zion would be. They knew he would be with her. For the next few hours, Lily became a ghost again. But this time, she was not hiding. She was hunting. She moved through the keep, her old invisibility her greatest asset. She watched. She listened. The signal was a key, and she was searching for the lock it fit. She observed the guards changing shifts, their movements, their casual gestures. She saw the signal used twice more, confirming what she already knew. It was an insider's code. Her search led her to the main hall where the council was in a heated, low-voiced debate. Lyra was arguing for an immediate retaliatory strike. The others urged caution. And then Lily saw him. Jorik. The beta she had humiliated in the training yard. He stood at the edge of the group, his face a perfect mask of grim concern. He was arguing passionately, agreeing with Lyra, his voice ringing with loyalty. "We cannot let this stand," he declared. "They struck at our alpha. We must show them Blackwood's strength." But as he spoke, his hand, resting on the hilt of his dagger, began to twitch. A nervous, unconscious gesture. 2 quick, sharp taps of his fingers against the leather. Again and again. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The lock had found its key. It was him. His public loyalty was a lie, a performance to cover the venom of his wounded pride. He saw her as a curse, and he had been willing to sacrifice his own alpha to prove it. She didn't scream. She didn't run to the council. That was the old Lily. The new Lily was a creature of Zion's world now. A world of strategy and cold, hard choices. She found Lyra alone. Moments later, as the silver-haired beta was sharpening her blades, her face a mask of cold fury. "The ambush was a betrayal," Lily said, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. Lyra snorted, not even looking up. "Of course it was a betrayal. They are our sworn enemies." "No," Lily said, her voice dropping, forcing Lyra to finally meet her gaze. "It was a betrayal from within." Slowly, calmly, she laid it out. The signal. The impossible precision of the attack. Jorik's public humiliation as a motive. His nervous, twitching fingers that mimicked the dying soldier's last gesture. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her initial skepticism giving way to a dawning, horrified understanding. The logic was cold, sharp, and undeniable. Together they found Jorik. The moment he saw them, the moment he saw the look in Lyra's icy eyes, he knew. The facade crumbled. Cornered, his loyalty a sham, his betrayal exposed, he finally broke. "You don't understand," he snarled, his face twisting into a mask of righteous hatred, his eyes fixed on Lily. "I did it for the pack, to save us from her. She is a poison that will destroy us all." "You betrayed your alpha," Lyra hissed, her voice dripping with venom. Jorik laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. "You are all fools. This was never about a war. It was a test. Kale doesn't want our territory. He wanted to see if the great Alpha Zion would bleed for his little Omega pet." He lunged for Lily, his face contorted with rage before 2 guards tackled him, slamming him to the floor. As they dragged him away, he screamed his final, terrifying revelation, his words echoing through the stone corridors. "He is coming, not for a battle. He is coming for his queen, and he will burn this entire keep to the ground to get her." Chapter 16. The Eye of the Storm. Jorik's final shrieking words echoed through the keep long after he was gone, a prophecy of fire and ruin. A panicked, frantic energy seized Blackwood. Warriors scrambled to reinforce the main gate, their faces grim, their movements sharp with adrenaline. The keep wasn't a fortress anymore, it was a trap, and they were all inside it. Lily found herself swept up in the current, her place once again in the infirmary, but the familiar scent of herbs was now laced with the acrid tang of dread. Every distant shout, every clang of steel on the training grounds made her flinch. Zion was a storm of command. his voice cutting through the rising panic, directing his warriors, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. But his golden eyes kept finding hers across the crowded halls, a silent, desperate communication passing between them, a promise to protect, a fear of failure. The attack, when it came, was not the full frontal assault they expected. It was smarter, crueler. A war horn sounded from the west, a high, piercing cry that ripped through the night. The western wall, the most vulnerable point, heavily wooded and difficult to defend. "They're here!" a scout screamed, his voice raw with terror. Zion moved, a blur of deadly grace. "Lyra, take the north wall! Hold them! I will lead the charge west!" He was gone, a tide of his most elite warriors flowing out of the main gate behind him, a wave of dark fury crashing into the night. The keep fell into an eerie, deceptive quiet. The sounds of a brutal, distant battle drifted back on the wind, the snarls of wolves, the screams of men. But inside the walls, there was only the low groan of the wounded and the frantic, whispered prayers of the healers. Lily worked, her hands moving automatically, her mind 1,000 miles away, with Zion in the dark woods. She felt a strange calm settle over her. The eye of the storm. This was it. The waiting was over. And then the storm broke inside the walls. It happened with no warning. A shadow fell across the infirmary door. Not a warrior, but something else. Sleeker. Quieter. A figure cloaked in black leather, its face hidden by a deep cowl, moved into the room with an unnatural silence. Then another, and another. They weren't an army. They were wraiths. Kale's elite guard. A healer screamed. The room exploded into chaos. The wounded tried to rise, only to be cut down with a brutal, silent efficiency. These weren't soldiers fighting a war. They were assassins with a single, specific target. Lily's blood ran cold. The Western attack, it was a feint. A diversion to draw Zion away, to leave the heart of the keep exposed, to leave her exposed. She scrambled backwards, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was the target. She was the only target. A cloaked figure turned, its hidden eyes fixing on her. It moved with a terrifying, inhuman speed. She threw a tray of medical instruments, a desperate, futile gesture. The figure swatted it aside without breaking stride. Cold, strong arms wrapped around her from behind. A hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream. A sharp, sweet smell filled her nostrils from a cloth pressed against her face. Her limbs grew heavy, her vision blurred, the chaotic scene of the infirmary dissolving into a swirl of light and shadow. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her whole was a flash of orange against the night sky through a high window. The western wall was burning. Chapter 17. The Gilded Serpent. Lily woke to the scent of jasmine and the soft caress of silk against her skin. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in her bed at Blackwood. But the air was different, warmer, and the silence was wrong. It wasn't the tense, humming silence of a fortress at war. It was a dead, sterile quiet. She sat up. She was in a lavishly decorated room, all white marble and gold filigree. A gentle breeze billowed through open balcony doors, carrying the scent of a lush, blooming garden. It was beautiful. And it was a cage. The doors to the room opened, and he walked in. Alpha Kale was not the monster she had imagined. He was handsome, in a sharp, predatory way, with eyes the color of a stormy sea and a smile that was both charming and chilling. He moved with a languid, serpentine grace, his presence filling the room not with raw power like Zion, but with a quiet, confident menace. He carried a single perfect white rose. "Welcome home, my dear," he said, his voice a smooth, cultured purr. He placed the rose in a crystal vase on a table beside her. "I do apologize for the theatricality of your arrival, but Zion is not one for reasonable negotiation." Lily stared at him, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. "Where am I?" "You are in the heart of the Red Fang territory," he said, his smile never wavering. "Where you belong, amongst your people." He gestured to the room. "This was your mother's chamber. I have kept it for you." The words were a physical blow. Her mother's room. "You knew my mother?" "I knew her very well," Kyle said, his stormy eyes darkening for a fraction of a second. "She was a remarkable woman, cursed with a foolish heart. She chose to throw her gifts away on a weak-blooded fool from a backwater pack. She chose love over legacy, a mistake you will not repeat." He began to walk around the room, his movements casual, his voice a hypnotic, silken thread, weaving a story meant to ensnare her. He spoke of the Moonfire bloodline, of their power, their destiny. He twisted the narrative, turning history into a weapon. "You see, my dear Lily," he said, stopping in front of her, his gaze intense. "Our bloodline, it seeks power, it craves it. It is an instinct as primal as the need to breathe. The attraction you feel for Zion. You mistake it for love. It is not. It is merely the ancient, predatory instinct of your blood recognizing a powerful host. It chose him as a suitable vessel to get close to, a means to an end." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your destiny was never to be his mate. It is to be his undoing. The Moonfire women were not mates. They were kingmakers. They used their bond to get close, to learn secrets. And then, when the time was right, they ensured the power fell to the one who was truly worthy, to their own blood." He gently touched the sigil on her shoulder. "Did you truly choose him? Or did your blood simply choose a target?" The words were a poison, seeping into the cracks of her doubt, twisting every memory, every feeling. Her defiance at the river, her choice to stay, their night together. Was any of it real? Or was she just a puppet, her strings pulled by a cursed ancient bloodline she didn't even know she had? He straightened up, his smile returning, cold and triumphant. He had planted the seed. Now, he would let it grow. "Rest," he said, his voice once again the charming host. "We have much to discuss about our future." He walked out, leaving her alone in the beautiful, silent room, the scent of jasmine thick in the air, choking her, as his poisonous words echoed in her mind, breeding a terrifying, monstrous doubt. Chapter 18. The Sound of Silence. The silence was the real prison. Kyle left her alone in that beautiful, suffocating room for what felt like an eternity. Days blurred into nights. Servants brought food on silver trays, their faces blank, their movements silent. They treated her not as a prisoner, but as a queen under house arrest. A priceless object to be preserved. A weapon to be kept polished until it was time to be used. His words had taken root in the fertile soil of her self-doubt and were now a twisted, thorny vine, choking everything else. Did you choose him? Or did your blood simply choose a target? She would pace the marble floors, the silk of her gown whispering behind her, the echo of his question following her like a shadow. She would stand on the balcony, looking out at a lush, peaceful garden and see only the flames of Blackwood Keep. It was her fault. All of it. She had brought this ruin upon Zion. She was a curse. The old voices came back then, the whispers of Anya and Kaylin in the pre-dawn kitchen. Broken. The scorn of Elder Thomas. Unsuitable. The silence of her own father, the loudest condemnation of all. They had all been right. They had seen the truth of her from the very beginning. Zion. He had been the only one who was wrong. He had seen a fire where there was only a curse. He had seen strength where there was only a fatal, destructive flaw. Kale's narrative was a perfect, seamless trap. It took every moment of her new, fragile strength and twisted it into something monstrous. Her defiance? A predator's assessment. Her choice to stay? An instinct to get closer to the heart of the enemy. Their night together. That was the worst. The memory once so precious was now tainted, a calculated act of biological warfare she hadn't even known she was waging. She sank onto the floor, her back against the cold marble wall, and wrapped her arms around her knees. She felt a hollowing out inside her, a vast, echoing emptiness where her hope had once been. She thought of the humiliation at the gathering, the moment she had fallen, her scars exposed to the laughing crowd. It felt like nothing had changed. She was still that same girl on the floor, exposed and worthless. The only difference was that now, her worthlessness had a body count. All is lost. The thought was not a wave of despair. It was a quiet, cold, final acceptance, a resignation. The core question that had haunted her, can someone so unwanted be truly loved, was finally answered. The answer was no. She was never meant to be loved. She was meant to be a tool, a vessel for a power she couldn't control, a curse that would destroy the only person who had ever looked at her and seen something worth saving. She closed her eyes. The best thing, the kindest thing she could do now, was to let him go, to let him forget her. She imagined him healing, his pack rebuilding, finding a new mate, a strong, true she-wolf who would bring him strength, not war. The image was a shard of glass in her heart, but she held on to it. It was her penance. In the deepest, darkest, most silent corner of her despair, when all other thoughts had faded to black, a whisper, a memory. Not of his power, not of his passion, not of the war he was fighting for her. Just his voice, in that small, dusty antechamber, the moment before the world fell apart. His voice quiet and certain, a single, unshakable truth in a world of lies. It isn't pity, it's recognition. The memory was not a light, it was not a hope. It was just there. A single, inexplicable note in the crushing, absolute silence of her surrender. Chapter 19. The Spark of Recognition. The silence was a tomb. The memory a single, flickering candle in the suffocating dark. It isn't pity. It's recognition. The words did not break the despair. They seeped into it, a drop of ink in water, slowly, inexorably changing its color. Cale's words were a perfect, logical trap, a flawless narrative of blood and destiny, a story where she was nothing but a function, a biological imperative. But Zion's word, it came before the sigil, before the politics, before he knew she was a weapon or a prize. In the woods, when she was nothing but a girl with a book and defiant eyes, he had seen her. Cale's story was about her bloodline. Zion's story was about her. The distinction was a fault line, a tiny crack in the perfect, seamless prison of Cale's logic, and through that crack, a sliver of light. Cale saw a symbol. Zion saw a soul. The thought was not a shout. It was a whisper that started in the deepest, most broken part of her, a whisper of truth. She was not a curse. She was not a biological weapon. She was a woman who a man, a powerful, impossible man, had looked at and recognized. The rest was just noise. The realization didn't come with a surge of power. It came with a profound, earth-shaking click, as if a final gear had just locked into place. And then she felt it. It started in her shoulder, at the heart of the silvery sigil. Not a burn, but a warmth. A gentle, liquid warmth that spread through her veins like warm honey. It wasn't a foreign power invading her. It was a part of her, waking from a long, long sleep. The world, which had been gray and muted, sharpened. The scent of jasmine from the garden was no longer a cloying, suffocating smell. She could pick out the individual notes of damp earth and night air beneath it. She could hear not just the silence, but the tiny sounds within it. The scuttling of a beetle on the marble floor, the slow rhythmic breathing of a guard down the hall. Her destiny wasn't written in blood. It was a choice she was going to make right now. She rose from the floor, her movements no longer sluggish with despair, but filled with a quiet, deliberate purpose. The door was locked, a heavy, ornate thing of iron and wood. The old Lily would have seen an impassable barrier. The new Lily listened. She placed her hand on the cold iron, and the warmth from her bloodline seemed to flow into it. She felt the vibrations inside, the tumblers of the lock, the slow, patient rhythm of their waiting. She could hear the guard outside, his heavy, predictable steps. Pacing. 10 steps one way. A turn. 10 steps back. A pattern. A weakness. She waited. She listened to the rhythm of his patrol, the length of his pauses. The moment he turned at the far end of the hall, she moved. She took a pin from the deep folds of her hair, the warmth in her fingers seeming to make the metal an extension of her own senses. She didn't pick the lock with skill. She coaxed it open with an intuitive understanding of its inner workings. A click, a whisper of metal on metal. The heavy door swung inward without a sound. The hallway was empty. A long stretch of moonlit marble lay between her and the shadows at the far end. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look back. She ran. Not as a victim fleeing a cage, but as a warrior racing towards a battlefield she had finally chosen for herself. Chapter 20. A queen, not a princess. The journey was a desperate, primal thing. Lily ran on instinct, her newly awakened senses her only guide. She could smell the direction of the wind, taste the subtle shifts in the air that told her which way the mountains lay. She avoided patrols not by seeing them, but by feeling the vibration of their approach through the soles of her bare feet. The Moonfire bloodline was not a weapon of war. It was an instrument of survival. And she had never felt more alive. She found what was left of the Blackwood forces in a hidden wooded valley, miles from the keep. It was not an army. It was a wound. A grim, makeshift camp, smelling of wood smoke, blood, and defeat. The warriors who had survived the feint at the western wall were scattered, their movements sluggish, their eyes hollow. They were a pack without its heart, without its anchor. When she stumbled out of the trees, a lone figure in a torn silk dress covered in dirt and scratches, they stared as if she were a ghost. A warrior raised his bow, his eyes wide with disbelief and suspicion. "It's her," someone whispered. Then, a voice cut through the stunned silence. "Lily." Zion. He emerged from the command tent, his face etched with exhaustion, a fresh bandage wrapped around his arm. The moment his eyes locked on hers, the entire camp seemed to hold its breath. He started to move towards her, his face a mask of raw, ragged relief. He expected to find her broken. He expected to have to save her. He found a queen instead. "The main gate is a trap," she said, her voice clear and steady, ringing with an authority that made the nearest warriors stop and turn. "Kale's fortress? It's a showpiece. He's arrogant. He expects a frontal assault. But his real strength isn't his walls. It's his pride." Zion stopped a few feet from her, his initial relief shifting to a stunned, profound awe. He saw it, the change. It wasn't just that she was alive. It was the fire in her eyes, the steel in her spine. This was not the timid, flinching girl he had claimed. "I was in his keep," she continued, her gaze sweeping over the assembled, listening warriors. "I know the layout. There's a service entrance, by the river, for supplies. It's a minor gate, barely guarded, because he would never imagine an attack from a place of servants." Her eyes found Zion's again. "He drew you out once with a feint. We will do the same. Lyra can lead a small, loud force to the main gate, a distraction. While he is focused on crushing the rebellion at his front door, you and a small strike team can go in through the back. You will cut the head off the serpent before it even knows it's in a fight." Silence. The warriors stared, not at a rescued victim, but at a strategist, a leader. Zion slowly closed the distance between them. He didn't embrace her. He didn't coddle her. He looked at her as his equal. "You are certain?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "I am," she said, without a flicker of doubt. He nodded, a slow, profound gesture of trust. He turned to the stunned faces of his pack. "You heard her?" he commanded, his voice booming with a renewed, ferocious energy that ignited the dying embers of their hope. "To the maps! We plan our attack!" As the warriors scrambled to obey, their movements no longer defeated but filled with a new, dangerous purpose, Zion turned back to Lily. He gently reached out and brushed a stray leaf from her hair. "I went to rescue a princess," he murmured, his voice thick with an emotion that went deeper than love. "And I find a queen has rescued us instead." Chapter 21. The War Horn. The camp transformed. The air, once thick with the stench of despair, now crackled with a focused, deadly energy. Hope was a dangerous, addictive drug, and Lily's return had given them a potent dose. She moved among them, a strange, quiet figure in borrowed leathers, no longer an outsider, no longer a curse. They looked at her with a new respect. She wasn't just the Alpha's mate. She was the architect of their last, desperate chance. She found Zion leaning over a map, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was tracing the route to the river gate, the one she had described. He looked up as she approached, the weary lines on his face softening. "It is a dangerous plan," he said, his voice a low murmur. "War is dangerous," she replied simply. He straightened up, his golden eyes searching hers. He reached to his belt and unhooked a dagger, a beautiful, deadly thing of dark, rippling steel and a worn leather grip. He held it out to her, hilt first. "I am not a warrior, Zion," she whispered, her eyes wide. "I know," he said, his voice gentle. He closed her fingers around the grip. "This isn't to make you a fighter. It is to remind you that you are not a victim. You were never a victim. You are the fire I saw in the woods. You are the heart of this pack. And it is time they all saw it." An hour later, they were ready. A small, elite force, the deadliest wolves in the pack, stood ready to follow Zion into the shadows. Lyra, her face a mask of cold, grim resolve, prepared to lead the larger diversionary force. The entire camp gathered, a sea of grim faces illuminated by the flickering torchlight. Zion climbed onto a rocky outcrop, Lily at his side. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. A deep, expectant silence fell over the valley. "For days, we have tasted fear," he began, his voice a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate in everyone's bones. "We have bled. We have lost brothers. Kyle of the Red Fang believes he has broken us. He believes our heart is gone." He paused, his golden gaze sweeping over his warriors. Then he turned and looked at Lily, his expression softening for a fraction of a second, a silent message passing between them that was more powerful than any speech. "He is wrong!" Zion roared, his voice now a clap of thunder that echoed off the mountains. "Our heart is not gone. Our heart has returned to us. We are not fighting for territory tonight. We are not fighting for pride. We fight for our future. We fight for our pack. We fight for our Luna." A roar erupted from the warriors, a single, unified, deafening sound. It was a cry of loyalty, of renewed hope, of ferocious, untamed fury. It was the sound of a pack that had found its soul again. Lily stood beside him, the cold, solid weight of the dagger at her hip a comforting presence. She was not afraid. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The march began. A silent, deadly river of shadows flowing through the night, leaving the cheering camp behind. Hours passed. The world was a blur of darkness and grim, determined faces. And then, through the trees, they saw it. A dark, jagged silhouette against the star-dusted sky. Kale's fortress. A monument to his arrogance. A tomb waiting to be filled. A single, high, piercing note cut through the night. Lyra's war horn. The diversion had begun. The final battle was here. Chapter 22. The Serpent's Pride. The river gate was a dark, rusted mouth, slick with moss and the smell of decay. It groaned in protest as Zion's warriors forced it open, the sound lost beneath the distant, chaotic symphony of Lyra's attack. They slipped inside, a stream of shadows pouring into the belly of the beast. The fortress was in chaos. Bells were ringing. Distant shouts echoed off the stone. Kale's forces were a disorganized swarm, all their attention focused on the grand, theatrical battle at the main gate. It was the perfect diversion. In the confusion, a section of the corridor collapsed from a stray catapult hit. Dust and debris rained down, the roar deafening. When the air cleared, Lily was on the other side of the rubble, cut off from Zion and the others. A horrifying, panicked beat of silence. Then Zion's voice, a desperate, muffled roar from the other side. "Lily!" "I'm all right," she shouted back, her voice thin against the noise. "Go! Don't stop! I'll find another way!" She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and ran, not with fear, but with a strange, cold clarity. She was a single instrument in this orchestra of war, and she had to play her part. Corridors twisted and turned. She followed the flow of the panicked guards, moving against the current, a ghost in their midst. Every instinct told her they were all being pulled towards the main gate, leaving something else, something important, completely unguarded. The throne room. She found it at the heart of the keep. The massive doors were unguarded, slightly ajar. A deep, unnatural silence emanated from within. While the rest of his fortress burned, the king was holding court. She pushed the doors open. He was there. Kyle, lounging on the massive carved throne as if he were watching a mildly amusing play. The sounds of battle were a distant murmur here. He was alone, waiting. "I knew you would come," he said, his voice a silken purr. He gestured to the room. "The blood always returns to the seat of its power. You see? You were destined to be here. With me." Lily walked slowly into the center of the room, the cold weight of the dagger at her hip a comforting presence. She felt nothing. His words were hollow, the venom gone. They were the meaningless ramblings of a man who could only see the world through the lens of his own ambition. "My blood didn't lead me here," she said, her voice quiet, but ringing with a power that made him sit up straighter. "My choices did." He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Your choices? You are a vessel, little girl. A beautiful, powerful vessel that belongs to me." He rose from the throne, moving towards her with that serpentine grace. "Zion has used you. He has filled your head with fantasies of love and belonging, but I will show you your true purpose." He lunged. He was fast, a blur of motion. The old Lily would have frozen. The new Lily listened. Her moonfire senses didn't give her strength. They gave her clarity. She heard the whisper of his leather boots on the stone, felt the shift in the air as he moved. She didn't meet his attack. She sidestepped it, her movement fluid, almost lazy. He stumbled, his momentum carrying him past her. He spun around, his face a mask of shock and fury. "You will not cage me," she said, her voice still unnervingly calm. He came at her again, a dagger now in his hand. The fight was a dance. He was all brutal, furious force. She was a leaf in the wind, a river flowing around a stone. She used his rage, his arrogance, against him. She ducked under a wild slash, her hand darting out, not to strike, but to snag the edge of a heavy tapestry. She pulled. The massive wall hanging ripped free, its heavy wooden rod swinging down, catching him in the back of the legs and sending him sprawling. He rose, roaring with frustration, and charged. This time she stood her ground. At the last possible second, she dropped, her foot hooking his ankle. He crashed to the floor, his dagger skittering across the marble. She was on him in a flash, her own dagger, the one Zion had given her, pressed against his throat. Silence. His stormy eyes were wide with disbelief and a dawning, terrible understanding. He was beaten, not by a warrior, not by an alpha, but by the broken girl he had so arrogantly underestimated, "My bloodline does not make me a killer," she whispered, her voice a cold, final judgment. "It makes me a survivor." She didn't kill him. She pressed the blade just hard enough to draw a single crimson drop of blood, a symbolic punctuation to his reign. She took his power not by ending his life, but by shattering his pride. As she stood up, the throne room doors burst open. Zion stood there, a whirlwind of bloody, battle-hardened fury, his elite warriors behind him ready to tear the room apart. He froze, his golden eyes taking in the scene, a defeated alpha on the floor, and his mate standing over him, victorious and whole. Chapter 23. The Kneeling. The battle ended not with a roar, but with a whisper. As word of Kale's defeat spread through the fortress, the fighting faltered. The Red Fang warriors, their alpha broken, their spirit shattered, began to lay down their arms. The fire in their eyes was replaced by a confused, dawning understanding. They had been fighting for a lie. The throne room became the center of this new, fragile world. The remaining warriors from both packs filed in, a tense, uneasy sea of black and red fur, of victors and vanquished. They formed a wide, silent circle. In the center lay the spoils of war, a defeated alpha, his pride in tatters, and a woman who had defied all expectation. Lily stood there, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a strange, trembling calm in its wake. She had done it. She had faced her demon and won. But what came next? She was still an outsider, a catalyst, a strange queen with no kingdom. Zion moved. He walked past the slumped form of Kale without a glance. He walked past the wary, watching faces of his own council. He walked past everyone until he stood directly in front of her. The entire world seemed to shrink to the space between them. She looked into his golden eyes, expecting a declaration, an order, a claiming. He was the victor, the alpha. This was his moment to cement his power. He did something else. Slowly, deliberately, in front of his warriors and his enemies, in front of the woman he had claimed and the world he had just conquered. He knelt. A collective, sharp intake of breath hissed through the room. Alphas did not kneel, not to anyone. He went down on one knee, his head bowed, not in submission, but in a gesture of profound, ultimate respect that was more powerful than any display of dominance. He did not kneel as a subject to a ruler. He knelt as a wolf to its mate. He knelt as a warrior to his queen. He took her hand, his large, warm fingers wrapping around hers, and he looked up at her, his golden eyes blazing with an emotion so fierce and so tender, it stole the air from her lungs. "Lily of the Moonfire," he said, his voice clear and ringing, a solemn vow in the silent hall. "Will you be my Luna? Will you lead this pack, these packs, with me?" Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow or fear, but of a joy so overwhelming it was a physical ache in her chest. All the whispers, all the scorn, all the years of feeling broken and worthless, they were washed away in this single, impossible moment. "Yes," she whispered, the word a ragged, beautiful sound. As the word left her lips, a movement caught her eye. Lyra, the icy, proud beta she-wolf whose respect was harder to win than any battle. Lyra went to one knee, then the one-eyed elder, then, one by one, a wave of dark fur and loyalty, the Blackwood warriors knelt. A moment later, a ripple went through the other side of the room. A grizzled old Red Fang warrior, his face a mask of awe, slowly lowered himself to his knee. Then another, and another. They were not kneeling to a conqueror. They were kneeling to their lost heritage, to the return of the Moonfire. The throne room was filled with kneeling wolves, a silent, powerful testament to the girl who had once been an outcast, who was now the heart of them all. Chapter 24. The map of scars weeks later, a fragile peace had settled over the mountains. The scent of blood had been replaced by the smell of pine smoke and baking bread. The Red Fang pack, freed from Kale's tyrannical ambition, was slowly, cautiously, beginning to merge with Blackwood, finding a new identity under a Luna they had once been sent to capture. The world was quiet. Lily lay in Zion's arms, in the vast, comfortable bed that no longer felt like a gilded cage, but like a home. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm, dancing glow over the room. Outside, a gentle snow was falling, muffling the world in a blanket of white. The war felt like a lifetime ago, a brutal, bloody dream. Zion was quiet, his hand gently, absently, tracing the patterns on her shoulder. The silvery marks seemed to shimmer in the firelight. She felt his touch, and for the first time in her entire life, there was no flinch, no trace of the old instinctive shame. She leaned into his touch, a soft, contented sigh escaping her lips. "They're not ugly, are they?" she whispered, the question a ghost from her past. He lifted his head, his golden eyes soft in the warm light. He looked at the marks, then back at her face, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across his lips. "I have seen the art in the halls of human kings," he murmured, his voice a low, intimate rumble. "I have seen the constellations in a clear winter sky. Nothing is as beautiful as this." He leaned down and pressed a soft, reverent kiss to the heart of the sigil on her shoulder. "This is the map that led me to you." She looked at him, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. The core question of her life, the one that had echoed in every empty room, in every jeering laugh, in every moment of crushing loneliness. Can someone who has only ever been unwanted finally be loved? Was answered. It was answered in the warmth of his hand, in the softness of his eyes, in the fierce, unwavering truth of his love. "They are not a map of where I came from," she whispered, her fingers tracing the hard line of his jaw. "They are a reminder that I survived." "No," he corrected gently, his eyes holding hers, his voice thick with a love that was as vast and as wild as the mountains outside. "They are not a reminder. They are a promise." He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers. "A promise that you were always, always on your way home. To me." His kiss sealed the promise, a deep, soulful connection that was not about passion or possession, but about peace. About two fractured souls who had found their missing pieces in each other, forging a bond stronger than any army, more sacred than any bloodline. The storm was over, and in the quiet, gentle stillness of the aftermath, they had finally, truly found their anchor.